out by saying, very importantly, that he had supported this investigation all along. He was all for protecting Robert Mueller as he went through the process and saw it to the very end. That said, he said when it comes to the Fisa warrant, the Clinton campaign, the counterintelligence investigation, he said it's been swept under the rug except by a few Republicans. Those days are over. Trey Gowdy joins us now, a Fox News contributor and former chairman of the House Oversight Committee. Trey, you've been listening to this along with us. He went on to explain to those reporters that the rule of law applies to Democrats and Republicans equally here. He explained why it's time to take a look at what he called the other side of this story. What did you take away from what you just heard there from the senator?
Well, Lindsay's right. There are some House Republicans that have been looking for the past 12 months at the FISA process, the origination of the FBI investigation in July of 2016. We were ridiculed by our Democrat colleagues and, quite frankly, by most people in the media for daring to ask how Jim Comey could have possibly cleared Hillary Clinton before she was interviewed. Democrats didn't want any part of that. So I am glad that Senator Graham and his Judiciary Committee is going to look at it. He's exactly right. The lady wears a blindfold. She's not a Republican. She's not a Democrat. As an American, you should want a Department of Justice and an FBI that you can have confidence in. But, Sandra, if anyone listening to that press conference wants to know why so many of my fellow citizens have so little confidence in the media, after 2 years and finding no evidence of conspiracy or coordination, the first three questions were not about that. They weren't about the origin of the investigation. It was about obstruction of justice. Not one question. There was three questions about obstruction and one about whether or not Lindsay should hold a campaign event in Florida. Nothing about the past 25 years, 2 years, $25 million, 500 witness interviews. No media inquiries about that.
It reminds you of this picture that stood out to all of us. James Comey tweeting out a picture of him standing in the forest with the title "So Many Questions," to which Lindsey Graham retweeted with the reply, "Could not agree more. See you soon." It leaves us wondering what is next as far as further investigations, where exactly he's going to go with that. What he did confirm at the podium just now, Trey, is that William Barr should testify, he said. As far as whether Robert Mueller will be put on the stand, he said he's going to leave it up to William Barr. What does happen next, Trey?
Yeah, I was with Lindsay all day yesterday and talked to him last night after the Comey tweet came out. Somebody needs to take Comey's Twitter account away from him. Someone who hates the president as much as he does, and the president is cleared on even a scintilla of evidence of collusion with the Russians. Keep in mind, Sandra, the Barr letter said despite multiple offers by the Russians, entreats into the Trump campaign. They still didn't do it, and Comey is not satisfied. Lindsay's going to bring Comey. I'm sure he's going to bring Barr. Where I disagree a little bit with Lindsay is on whether or not this report should be made public. The Department of Justice answers true-false questions. Should you be indicted? Should you not be indicted? They don't write reports about other misconduct that doesn't rise to the criminal level, and they don't do Oppo research on people that we don't like. That's part of how we got where we are now, is the FBI and the DOJ were given Oppo research by Fusion GPS. To then allow Adam Schiff and Swalwell
and he's got so many questions,
and Castro.
Yeah. So, Trey Gowdy, I have to leave it there. I want to get to Brett Hume. Trey Gowdy, thank you for standing by through that with us.
But first to the Mueller probe. The special counsel's investigation did not find that the Trump campaign or anyone associated with it conspired or coordinated with Russia in its efforts to influence the 2016 U.S. presidential election. End quote. That is Robert Mueller's conclusion after nearly 2 years of investigating the matter. The Attorney General repeated versions of that sentence 4 times in his summary of Mueller's report released yesterday. Whatever you think of Donald Trump, it is now factually established that he did not collude with Vladimir Putin to steal the presidential election, period. That case is now closed. This is the point in the story where applause breaks out, not just cheers from Trump and his family and his campaign staff and all those many people who were told they were going to be indicted but weren't, but gratitude from the country itself, from all Americans of all political parties. For years, we've all been told that our government was being controlled by a foreign power. There were spies in our midst. The President of the United States was one of them. He was disloyal, a quisling, an agent of a nation that hates us and seeks our destruction. That man was at the helm of our country, destroying democracy, undermining our values, poisoning this nation from within. It was terrifying, and millions of Americans were terrified. Some wept as they talked about their fear and helplessness. Now we know that none of that was true. You would think the relief at learning this would be overpowering, like finding out a terminal illness was just a cold. The long and bitter war has ended. We are safe. But that is not how most on the left are responding tonight. They are not celebrating for their country. They are not grateful. They are angrier than ever. To them, the Mueller investigation has proved nothing and exonerated no one. Russian collusion is as real to them as it was the day Hillary Clinton first alleged it. Progressives have not surrendered. The vast robot army of the Democratic Party fights on as if nothing has changed.
The fact that this investigation takes place within the Justice Department, which Donald Trump essentially controls, and that he got rid of the problem, Jeff Sessions, who the one decent thing that he did was just recuse himself. This guy is not recused. It feels like the seeds of a cover-up are here.
Oh, a cover-up. And not just a cover-up, but a cover-up being perpetuated with the help of Mr. Robert S. Mueller, the very man you loved and trusted, the one whose report you look forward to like it was Christmas, the gray-haired angel of truth who is going to deliver you from the orange scourge, our friend Robert Mueller. It turns out Mueller was part of this conspiracy, too. It was a conspiracy so brilliant, so complex, that he and 18 other federal prosecutors conducted a 2-year Potemkin investigation in order to shield their plot from discovery. Diabolical. Why would Mueller do that? Come on. You know the answer because it's always the same answer. Robert Mueller is a racist.
Look, if I'm the Trump children and I'm having a party tonight, right? Like they won the white privilege regatta, all right? Like you cannot investigate. There is not an African American person in this country that could have been investigated for 22 months, had their family investigated for 22 months, and come away scot-free.
A racist plot. That's what NBC is telling you. If that sounds like a far-fetched claim, keep in mind that you're the wacko. They're always telling you that. You're a conspiracy nut, they'll say. You believe in crazy things on the basis of zero evidence, you and Alex Jones. You think the left is coming for your guns. You think mass immigration is hurting this country. You think illegal aliens are voting in elections. You imagine the tech companies are censoring political speech. You don't trust the media. And by the way, you don't believe in science, and that's why you're hesitant to give a 29-year-old freshman member of Congress complete control over the U.S. economy. You're a lunatic. You should be ignored. And so should Trump, by the way. Go ahead and ignore his complaints about being persecuted. He's just whining. Here's NBC suggesting that it's actually Donald Trump, the guy who's been falsely denounced for betraying his country as a Russian agent, who owes the apology. An apology to the prosecutors who hounded him.
Did Robert Mueller deserve better from the president than this kind of language and behavior? He trashed him for 2 years. And in the end, Mueller just did an investigation that ultimately the president considers a total exoneration of him. Does he owe Robert Mueller an apology for that kind of rhetoric?
It goes without saying that Democratic members of Congress echoed these sentiments, or maybe it was the other way around, the media aping the Democratic Party. Suddenly it's hard to tell who's taking cues from whom. Any remaining distinctions between journalists and the country's ruling class have long since disappeared. Reporters used to boast about holding the powerful to account. Now they scramble to do their bidding. The Washington Post is owned by the richest progressive in the world. They're all one interest group now. You can't tell one from another. Politicians and prosecutors and intel agency heads told us implausible lies about Russian collusion. Reporters are paid to push back, but they didn't. Instead, they welcomed those lies and then amplified them. They were proud to do that, and they're not apologizing for it now. In their first statement after the Mueller report summary became public, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, the two leaders of the Democratic Party in Congress, didn't mention the fact that Trump had been cleared of collusion. Neither did any Democratic politician appearing on cable news. Virginia Congressman Don Beyer insisted this morning that, quote, there was a lot of collusion within the Trump campaign. even though Robert Mueller, whom Democrats have told us many times is the final word on the question, had already told us otherwise. So nobody was fooled by any of this. Mueller's summary is on the internet. You can read it yourself if you want and reach your own conclusions. So by lying about the obvious and doing it so obviously, Democrats merely revealed themselves to be everything they claim Donald Trump is: stupid, irresponsible, reckless, corrupt, buffoonish. They had to know their talking points wouldn't work. They repeated them anyway. Why? Because they didn't know what else to say. Over on CNN, Jeff Zucker dispatched his eunuch to address the channel's viewership, meaning those Americans trapped at the airport waiting for flights. You may think CNN has been lying to you relentlessly for the last 2 years, the eunuch explained. Not at all. CNN has done a fantastic job. None of this was our fault. We're amazing. Listen to him squeak.
Reporting is what adds the most value. Finding out something new, putting out new information into the world is the best feeling in journalism. It's the greatest value add. That's what hundreds of journalists have been doing, trying to solve pieces of this Trump-Russia puzzle. So don't be fooled by the partisans who cherry pick the worst mistakes of individual journalists or the craziest ideas from commentators and claim that's the entire media. It's not. We're waiting for the facts, because here is what I know. I mean, you're going to hear this from the right for the next days and weeks to come, that the press has basically made all of this up to take down President Trump. But the press is just following a trail that Trump created.
The greatest value add. That's how CNN sums up its role in the Russia story. Does a single person believe that? Of course not. Not one person. Jeff Zucker himself doesn't believe that, and that's why he sent his marionette out to lie, as you just saw. Jeff Zucker is an anxious man tonight. He's been caught doing the one thing journalists are not allowed to do. He intentionally misled his audience. In a fair world, Jeff Zucker would be running a car wash, or he'd be selling timeshares in Cancun. He would not be in the news business. Zucker himself knows that very well. He knows he's an imposter. In a fair world, CNN wouldn't call itself a news network at all. It's far less than that, and it has been for a long time. In 1996, CNN blamed the Olympic bombings in Atlanta on an entirely innocent security guard named Richard Jewell. In the end, CNN paid Jewell a settlement for slandering him, but Jewell never recovered his life. Just 2 years later, CNN falsely accused the United States military of murdering American defectors during the Vietnam War with sarin gas. It was a ludicrous story based on obvious lies. CNN ran it anyway because it confirmed their worldview. 3 years after that, CNN implied, again on the basis of zero evidence, that a California congressman called Gary Condit had murdered one of his interns. CNN's relentless coverage helped drive Condit from office. Condit turned out to be innocent. Too late. His life and family were destroyed. Now, you'd think a news network might learn from debacles like this, and yet under the leadership of Jeff Zucker, CNN's recklessness and its dishonesty have only accelerated. Just this past September, CNN told us that Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh was a serial gang rapist alcoholic who targeted underage girls. Then in January, they told us that a group of boys from a Catholic school in Kentucky were dangerous bigots who'd threatened a revered tribal elder Vietnam veteran purely because they hated American Indians. Every part of that claim was a lie, and CNN is now facing a $275 million lawsuit for repeating that lie. Yet CNN kept going. Just days after its Covington Catholic fraud, CNN decided to amplify yet another racially divisive hoax, Jussie Smollett's manufactured hate crime. And now this. Exactly 2 weeks after Smollett was indicted for telling the same lies that CNN uncritically repeated, we learned that the Russian collusion narrative, which, by the way, has formed the backbone of CNN's entire programming schedule for 2 years, is fake. It's a hoax. It never happened. CNN responded by congratulating itself. Jeff Zucker still runs the network. His job apparently is safe. CNN's anchors wonder aloud why Americans don't trust the news media. Must be that propaganda from Fox News. Yeah, must be. It has absolutely nothing to do with coverage like this.
Potentially big new questions in the Russia investigation and the corresponding lack of answers from the White House.
And any kind of collusion with the Russians.
And then there's the Russia investigation.
We know the Russians were involved in interfering with the election.
How do you explain the Manafort allegations as anything but collusion?
And it's on the question of collusion, possible collusion with Russia.
Fact. It's Russia.
Fact. It's Russia. Okay, thanks for that, Mr. Lamont. So what are these voices of authority you just saw on CNN saying now that the facts have arrived? Have they apologized or corrected themselves or even acknowledged their role in perpetuating this hoax? Let's see. Here's Carl Bernstein, whose sloppy Watergate reporting from half a century ago somehow keeps him on television to this day. Carl has thought a lot about this question. He's decided that, in his august and seasoned opinion as a celebrated newsman, CNN did a remarkable job here.
And I think we've done, the media, the press has done one of the great reporting jobs in the history, especially of covering a presidency by the most news organizations. And look, let's look at where the disinformation and mistakes and lying have come from. Hasn't come from the press. It's come from the President of the United States and those around him.
Okay. In case you're wondering, and you may be, why Donald Trump got elected President of the United States, you just saw it. Trump may be flawed, but the people in charge are just absurd. The Washington Post and the New York Times have no idea. They still don't know why Trump won the election. They wholeheartedly agree with their friend Carl Bernstein. Both of those newspapers won Pulitzer Prizes for their Russia coverage. In its citation, the Pulitzer Committee commended the reporters for their, quote, deeply sourced, relentlessly reported coverage in the public interest that dramatically furthered the nation's understanding of Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election and its connections to the Trump campaign, the president-elect's transition team, and his eventual administration. End quote. Read that run-on sentence again if you dare. You might want to keep those words somewhere as a keepsake memento, like that Dewey defeats Truman headline from the Chicago Tribune so many years ago. A monument to human absurdity. Your grandkids can read it and snicker. The Times and the Post, though, don't get the joke. They have no plans to return their prizes. They think they did a great job. The rest of us can keep laughing, but there's an ominous lesson here, too. Our leaders are not fit to lead. They have no idea what they're doing, and they won't admit it. They're hysterical children. Cruel and stupid and vain. They care only about themselves. They learn nothing from their mistakes. And so, their self-regard undiminished, they march on to the next disaster, full of self-righteous confidence. The next battle, they tell us, is over obstruction of justice. It doesn't seem to occur to them that justice is precisely what we got yesterday. 19 federal prosecutors spent nearly 2 years investigating the Democratic Party's claim that Donald Trump stole the presidential election. Investigators in the case had a limitless budget and essentially no restrictions of any kind. They hired dozens of FBI agents, intelligence analysts, and forensic accountants to help them investigate. They issued nearly 3,000 subpoenas. They received hundreds of search warrants and hundreds more surveillance orders. They showed up at people's homes with automatic weapons pointed in their faces. They spied on American citizens. They read their texts, downloaded their emails. They interviewed at least 500 separate witnesses. Not since September 11th have federal investigators dug more deeply into a case. And in the end, they proved the charges false. Democrats have decided to ignore the findings. Instead, they say they want justice, by which, of course, they mean revenge, punishment, power. That's what they've always wanted. The rest of this, the Mueller investigation included, was staged purely for show. Shame on the rest of us for falling for it yet again. You'd like to believe the people who did this will be held accountable. They hurt our country. They poisoned our public sphere. They distorted our foreign policy. They completely terrified the population. They should be punished. It's not like we don't punish people here. We live in a society where people lose their jobs for believing in biology, a place where college students risk having their lives destroyed for telling the wrong joke. America is suddenly a very punitive place. But these people will escape what they deserve. You know they will because they so often have before. The very same people who pushed the Russia collusion conspiracy are the ones who told us Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction in 2003. A few years after that, they'd assured us that the housing market was absolutely solid, no problem. Go ahead and invest. Just the other day, they informed us that we'll have to stay in Syria and Afghanistan forever because of threats that only they understand. Tomorrow, they'll be telling you to take the bus to work because of global warming. They will never take the bus. They won't have to. They will never face the consequences of the disasters they created. Instead, they'll keep getting rich from failure, another TV contract, another committee chairmanship, another fat grant from a Soros-funded foundation. And as they prosper, they will continue to lecture you from Twitter about your imaginary moral failings. Shut up, racist, obey. That's what's likely to happen in the aftermath of this hoax. That's what's always happened. How long do they think this can continue?